Hi, and welcome back to day 3 of the co-op takeover of Accessibility Manchester, with a special focus on inclusion and accessibility. Over the last 2 days, we've heard some fantastic lightning talks all about what it means to be inclusive, how to do accessibility at scale, and then finally today we wrap out the event by talking all about how to get it done. So how do you get accessibility done practically within teams building products and services? And we've got 5 brilliant talks lined up for you again today. Don't forget, as I've said before, if you've got any questions during the event, feel free to pop them in the YouTube live chat or go on Sli.do and use the hashtag accessibility. We won't be able to answer the questions during the event, but what we will do is follow up with a blog post afterwards that answers many of the questions that we see, and we'll do a good summation of the event. So today, your 5 brilliant speakers are, we've got Phoebe, who's talking all about getting people to care about accessibility when you're delivering digital products and services. You know, it's all too easy for people to talk about, faster, I don't care about accessibility. And that's not the case. I think if we bring to life accessibility for people, people will begin to understand that it both not only makes ethical sense, but it also makes commercial sense to be accessible. So Phoebe will be talking all about how to get people to sit up and take notice. Our second talk is from a team, from one of our teams called Cooperate. And they're talking about all about how to include accessibility in your work. So how do you just make it a part of the rhythm and routine of what you're doing? Accessibility isn't something special or something one-off that you do. It's just how we work. It's just what happens. Third up, we've got Alexandra, who's talking about can a banner be accessible? So really getting into some of the practicalities of how we make our products and services accessible, and how we can bring that to life. Fourth up is Hannah, who's going to talk about researching with Fable. Yesterday we heard from Sam, so now you're going to hear about the practical applications of using Fable. Hannah talked in our show and tell recently about how we've used Fable on our identity service, and it was fantastic to see how as soon as we begin to research using tools like Fable, accessibility is brought to life for teams. So I can't wait to see what Hannah's got to say about that. And then finally, we've got Paul from our insurance team, who's going to talk about what to remember when you're designing forms. Forms are a huge talking point for us, with lots of debate and opinion on how to do them. But actually, when you're making forms accessible, there's some really important fundamentals that you've got to get right. And Paul's going to talk to you all about that. So they're the 5 speakers that we've got lined up for today. I'm sure you can't wait to hear from them. So I will hand over to our very first speaker of the day, Phoebe Quayle.
I'm Phoebe. I'm a delivery manager at Co-op, and I'm going to be talking to you about getting people to care about accessibility when you're delivering digital products. And in this talk, I guess I'm going to be telling you a story about how I got that very wrong, on the hope that you don't make the same mistakes that I did and experience the same, I guess, frustration and heartbreak. I'm going to give you a bit of context of why I needed people to care. So I was working in a team whereby we were designing a number of tools, like digital tools for their business, but they were using a different team to actually physically build them. And we were running a number of focused design crits that were focusing on assisted technology and how our designs were responding with those. And it was becoming quite clear that a lot of these tools we were building just fundamentally wouldn't be usable with people using those assisted technologies, which was not only upsetting, but also I was starting to get quite nervous because we were rolling a number of these design patterns across more and more tools. And I was nervous about accumulating design debt and technical debt. And we were investing so much money into them. So I needed to try and put forward a case to have this team prioritize these changes over new requests that were being asked of them. And when you're trying to convince other people, you're usually trying to work out what do we think are the most compelling reasons why, and do you have a shared sense of principles? And we knew with this team they weren't the same. So we took the angle of trying to be more commercially focused. We put a presentation together about how not only are we actively excluding these users from our business, but also reputationally that could impact the rest of the cooperative group. And then we talked about the commercial impact of that once someone knows that your tool isn't accessible, why would they use anything else? And what was quite frustrating is the response to this was straight away I was asked for numbers of how many users that would be. And unfortunately, we weren't tracking that type of data as we were, say, the types of browsers people were using or devices. So I couldn't put a figure on it. But also, what was frustrating is I then found out after talking about this that they weren't the right people to make the decision. They were a bit more hierarchical. So I had to go up the chain. And what was frustrating is no matter how high up I went, I just kept on getting the same responses, and it was starting to get really frustrating that I couldn't get these people to care about it and prioritize it, which I guess explains the reason for my next response, which I'm not proud of. I became quite mean. And what I ended up doing was saying, right, well, if you don't address these problems, when you come to want to roll them out on a platform, which we had a bit more authority on, I said I wouldn't allow them to do that unless they made these changes. And understandably, the response to this was one of anger, frustration, panic. How they're going to tell their boss that they can't. What was silly of me in this instant is not only was it a bit tit for tat, and I was pushing my problem onto them, is ultimately I didn't have the right plan in place to then help support them do that. I had a few ideas, but not how to address the already large amount of technical estate we'd built up. And so the conversation died. What I then did next was, after a bit of a breather and trying to work out what I could do, I was able to get some budgets, and I recruited a number of participants who used a wide range of assistive technology, and we chose to do interviews with them across one of their favourite tools. This tool was an inheritance tax calculator. So you put your details in, it tells you if you have an inheritance tax bill, and then we tell you how you might siphon part of that off to protect your family rather than it going to the tax man. And this was one tool out of a range of suite, which the business are using as a new way of trying to, I guess, communicate with their customers. It was a brand new strategy for them. And we invited that team to these interviews, and then we also ran a number of show and tells, and we created some edited clips. And this is where finally the door managed to open. When you see a user struggling to get past the first step of a tool that you've spent a lot of time designing, building, and investing money in as well, which is going to transform, as I said, the way you communicate with your customer, and it's going to transform the way you do business. Seeing them struggle, and not only struggle, but get really quite frustrated. They've not been able to get through the first step, and it's probably the fifth or sixth time that day they're encountering the same problem. This is where the conversation started around, like, well, actually, yeah, this is important. And from there, we've now been able to prioritize a plan of how to address some of the things we can fix immediately. And we have a plan more long term of how to try and address that across the rest of these tools. And what's been really good about it is I've not been the only one now to try and put a plan together. We're doing that collectively. But the thing that's really exciting is, as a group, we're now talking about accessibility the same way as we would talk about performance and security. We're talking about it quite regularly. We're talking about it at a design level before it even goes into build, where we're able to highlight where we think things might go wrong and have the confidence to say, actually, I don't know how a user will respond to this. Let's go and do some testing before we build it. And it's just really nice to see that shift happen in such a short space of time. So I guess what I'm saying to you is, rather than beating about the bush and trying to frame these things in different angles that you think people would like, just put it in front of users. Just go to that extra effort, and you'll be surprised how quickly that conversation will open up. Thank you.
We work on corporate, which lists things to do, and groups that make good things happen in communities around the UK. It's kind of like an online community centre. Just like the diverse communities we all live in and community centres serve, it is really important corporate reflect that diversity and is inclusive and accessible to everyone.
Recently we decided to overhaul the whole design of the Cooperate website. When we did this, we decided that we were going to get rid of all the stock photography that we were previously using and only use images that were uploaded by community organisers. We did this to show the diverse range of real people doing good things in their communities. We don't rely on colour alone to signify differences. We also made sure that all the colours we were using had enough colour contrast to make the text easily readable. And for the designers out there, there's a great Figma plugin I'd recommend, which is called Able, and it shows you whether it passes AA and AAA standards.
At Co-op, 1 in 5 of our research participants has an accessibility need. On our most recent testing on the Cooperate platform for the design overhaul, we tested with people who had mobility and cognitive impairments. We also worked with our recruitment agency, People for Research, to ensure that we were chatting to a diverse range of people across Manchester and London. Previously on Cooperate, when we'd reached out to local groups or to groups that were listed on our website, we found that we were speaking to a lot of the same people from similar age groups. By working with People for Research, we were able to speak to a range of people from different ages, ethnicities, and genders. The findings from the research were really valuable. For example, on our activity page, we realised that we needed to include parking information and accessibility information for buildings. We also saw that we needed different privacy settings for different groups. So for example, we spoke to a women's group that needed to protect the members within the group. By testing with a diverse group of people with different accessibility needs, we've been able to ensure that the Cooperate website is the most helpful it can be for everyone.
So there's broadly 2 different types of content on the Cooperate site. Content we've written to help people get around and understand the site, and content that's been created by our users. So that's groups and organisers in communities across the UK. Across the site we've made sure all the links are descriptive and they reflect where they're taking people. This is especially useful for screen reader users who can navigate pages using links alone. We've reduced the amount of content on some of the pages. This is to help people get to where they need to fast and reduce the cognitive load. That's the amount of mental effort it takes to get there. All headings and subheadings are descriptive and clearly state what you can do in that section. This helps people find what they need to quickly. It also reflects the way we know people read online, so they skim read the page rather than reading word for word. We've used plain English and simple, clear instructions throughout the site. This reduces barriers and opens up the site so that more people, no matter what their circumstances, can use it.
We're managing so much user-generated content on Cooperate. It's important we guide people to create accessible content. We've introduced content guidelines prompting people to explain acronyms, use short sentences as they're easier to understand, and use bullet points instead of commas as they're easier to scan. We've reduced the amount of free text boxes in our forms and offered more multiple choice answers. This helps people who are time poor or might worry about their grammar or literacy. Where we have used text boxes, we've used hint text and design techniques to help people know what kind of information we need. This can help reassure and guide people.
To make sure the site is accessible, we need to make sure all users, whatever the device, can access the site. They could be using a mobile phone, they could be using a tablet or a desktop computer, but they could be using a screen reader, for instance, or any other form of assistive technology. We follow the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines when writing the markup to the site, which is the code that the browser understands. It means that the screen readers can also understand it in a way that makes sense to users. To make sure that we follow those guidelines, we use a set of tools which analyze the code on the page and will highlight areas where maybe we need to focus and change a few things when there's not enough of a description for an image, for instance, or where a button is mislabeled and not understandable. And we do also a lot of testing by hand, so using the keyboard, for example, to make sure that the site can be used without a mouse and functions correctly for all users.
To ask a question, visit Sli.do/accessibility Manchester. You'll find a link in the YouTube description.
Hi, my name's Alexandra and I have a great story to tell you. I will take you through my journey with my very first design project as a junior designer here at the Co-op. I work in a food team. Actually, the full name is Food Customer Experience, and for those who are not familiar with the Co-op services, our main focus is making online shopping easier for you. A while ago, I was asked to review a usage of banners across a site. So I thought, right, seems easy to me. But I actually couldn't have been more wrong, and let me tell you why. So, what banners am I referring to? Well, what has puzzled me for a while is the question, what is a banner? But today I will be talking about those images here that you can see on a slide. And I have a question for you. Take a moment and think. When was the last time you saw a banner on an advert while browsing a page? And then the next question is, can you recall what was advertised in that banner? In my experience, I was on a social media platform and a banner popped out. I was aware shortly afterwards that I hadn't got any recollections of a product advertised in that banner. Let's not forget that companies spend a lot of money on these banners, and if they are inaccessible, ineffective, then the advertising budget has been wasted. The term to describe this lack of engagement is banner blindness. For some businesses, banners are effective. They help to drive traffic to certain pages. But for us users, it's something rather that disturbs our online experience. So this project, as you can understand, is starting to get challenging. I collected all banners on our site to have a closer look and examine the problem. Actually, what is a problem we are trying to solve here? So I assessed all our banners against our accessibility policy. What I found out mostly was poor alt text, problem with contrast. The text was too small and difficult to read. Mobile friendly is crucial because most of the people are accessing our website through their mobile phones. One of other problems we identified was lack of visual consistency and overload of information. I also used a vision stimulation tool to experience how someone who has a sight problem may see a banner. I also looked at some competitors to see if they have banners, and if not, how do they execute certain messages such as sponsored products or deals. Here at the Co-op, we design for everyone, so fixing inaccessible assets is important to us. We also have accessibility policy, and under design section, the third bullet point states, record any reasons for not meeting accessibility guidelines and share it with a product owner. So I did. I've written a few questions to understand the process of a banner. Where does it sit with a service map? who is involved, and where is the gap. Because here at the Co-op we design in open and findings are shared with team members, I had several meetings with stakeholders which allowed me to understand the current pain points, for example, lack of assets. This all led to the question, do we need a banner? Well, my answer is yes and no. So, is there any other way we can execute the information, different than in a banner, but in an accessible way? We decided to narrow our focus on one category, which is sponsored product. We considered two things: placement, where this component can sit in a journey, category, search, and visual design. I visited a store with intention to explore the product messages, labels, and leaflets. I also look at the assets used in emails, ads, and press. We started to reflect this visual language in a component design. It's work in progress. This is what the banner used to look like, and this is what we are exploring and could look like. We are still in a process, but our approach is to keep the typography style, size above 14 pixels on mobiles, keep the ratio of color contrast, keep the message and language clear, keep lines of text around 60 characters. We had a number of great pairing sessions with other designers. We are still working on it, and component will be tested to measure the success. What's interesting, I think personally, that banners are often forgotten pieces of website. The issues were very common and easy to fix. So I'm very happy that we are working on it at the moment. Banners can be accessible. If you would like to find out how we are doing with the banners, keep shopping with us, follow our digital blog, and follow us on Twitter. Thank you!
Hello, my talk is about my experience of using Fable for accessibility testing. So first of all, just a little bit about me. I'm Hannah Pass, I'm a user research lead at the Co-op and I work on the membership team. I do have a background in accessibility. I used to work in the agency called Sigma, now called Nexa, where I used to run audits and facilitate accessibility testing. And when I used to work at the cooperative bank, I used to run accessibility training sessions as well. I think a lot of people, when they think of accessibility testing, people just naturally think screen readers, and I have been guilty of that too. And I don't think it helps that the WCAG guidelines do tend to have a focus on screen reader issues as well. And we've got access to Fable at Co-op, and what this is, it's a website or software that allows you to test your journeys with people with assistive technology really easily. So whether that's a screen reader, screen magnification, switches, voice activation, there's a wide range of technology there that you can use, and you can also be really specific if you want to. So if you wanted to use NVDA on a Windows computer, you can do that, or JAWS on Windows, you can be really specific and narrowing it right down if that's what you want to do. And there are a variety of different tests you can do. So you can run audits, like that example there on the screenshot where it's got graphs and it will tell you the issues one by one that people have faced. You can do moderated one-to-one sessions or unmoderated ones too. And you can even have QA sessions as well with people who've got more technical knowledge who can give code recommendations. So that's always really useful to have if you want if there's a specific problem and you don't know how to fix it. So I first tried out Fable using our careers website. We were already aware that this has a lot of issues, but it's just something that's really important for us as a co-op because not only should we make our systems accessible for our customers, we need to make sure that staff can also apply for a job here. So I tested it with 3 people, and that was one of each. So a screen magnification, a screen reader, and a voice activation. It was actually the first time I'd ever seen or facilitated a test with someone who used voice to navigate a website. It was actually really, really interesting. I was a bit nervous at first, but it was so eye-opening. And each test showed us different issues. So screen magnification, that highlighted issues on the design side of it. So more like the font weight, empty space, colour contrast, the size of the text. So it highlighted more visual problems, which we weren't as aware of. And the screen reader and voice activation highlighted issues to do with the code. So that was in terms of the way the form works, like errors and radio buttons. And some of the issues that people faced, they weren't able to continue without me explaining what was happening on the screen. So, for example, that screenshot there, the Find Your Job container, the yellow box there. When you type in a job, there's a drop-down box that appears. But for a screen reader user, it didn't tell them that there was a drop-down listing that they had to select. So they weren't able to continue on the first screen. So that's really, really bad. I had to explain them to use their arrow keys to continue. But yeah, they weren't even able to get to the second page. So the main thing I want you to get out of this talk is the importance of testing with a range of assistive technology. We wouldn't have uncovered half the issues without testing with the other types. So we wouldn't have got all the visual issues, and there were loads, if we didn't test the screen magnification, and we wouldn't have got the issues with the code if it wasn't for the voice activation. And they are all equally important. There's not one assistive technology that's more important than another. And my recommendation is that to ensure that your systems are accessible as possible is to test with the range of assistive technology and different types too. We've only had Fable for a few months, and I'm not here to sell Fable. I work for the co-op, not Fable. I just want to talk about my experience of using it, and that it has opened so many doors already in just a few months we've been using it. You do only need to give 2 days notice, and you can have your sessions booked in. I'm not used to that at all. I'm used to that 2-week lead time, the POs, and it's quite hard to book in sessions. Another great advantage is that they're connected to our VPN for systems that require a login, which is great because the products that I work on all do require a login. And this has been a blocker in the past for systems that I've wanted to test that require the user's laptop to be on our network and IT blocking it. So that was a really, really great advantage of using it. Another advantage is that it spread the word about accessibility to the team. It's now being talked about daily in our daily stand-ups. And it's really great to hear the word accessibility talked about all the time. And even people who are completely new to accessibility have the opportunity to do their own tests, and they feel confident doing so because of the constant exposure that they've got at the co-op. There's a woman that I work with who is completely new to digital and accessibility, who now has put her hand up and wants to facilitate a test and feels confident doing so, again, because of that constant exposure that she's had from working with me and with the team. It is important to know that it's not perfect. They don't fit the traditional screener questions that you may have. So if we want co-op customers or people if you planned a funeral, we're probably not going to get that, especially the co-op customers because the company's in Canada. So the context isn't quite there. So you don't get that side of the testing out of it. It is the only downfall. The pros definitely outweigh this con, and you can always test further with recruitment agencies as well. So it's not saying you can't do it, it's just you can't do it with this software. I'd always recommend if you need that context to test with a recruitment agency and get that. And when you bake accessibility in from the start, like what we have done for our registration and forgotten password journey, this is what you get. So this is a quote from someone from a moderated Fable test. "This is one of the most easiest, pleasurable websites that I've navigated." And it was great to hear someone talk like that about a system that we've spent so much time making accessible. And we also requested an audit as well, and it came back with 0 issues, and that is the first time that has ever happened. So it just goes to show, if you do put the effort in up front, you test with a wide range of technology, this is the outcome that you get, and it's just great to see. Thank you.
What to remember when designing forms. Hi there, I'm Paul Braddock, UX designer working at Corp Insurance. I'm going to give you 4 golden rules when designing a form. But when did you last use a form? To sign up to this event? To order a takeaway? We use a lot of forms at Co-op, across food, legal, insurance, and membership. From buying food online, signing up or into membership, buying a funeral plan, getting a will, or even getting insurance cover. Forms are the centre of every meaningful interaction, and good user experience encourages users to return. We are one Co-op, so if our customers find any product inaccessible, they are unlikely to return to another Co-op product or service. And we know that 83% of people with access needs limit their shopping to websites they know are barrier-free. Let me repeat that. 83% of people with access needs limit their shopping to websites they know are barrier-free. And forms can attract a lot of usability and accessibility issues. Generally, they face the same problems, so it is important we create design patterns that saves time for the designer, but more importantly, creates consistency for the user experience. And that's where the Co-op design system comes in. Laura Kalbag writes in her book, Accessibility for Everyone, 4 broad parameters that improve the user experience. Visual, make it easy to see. Auditory, make it easy to hear. Motor, make it easy to interact with. Cognitive, make it easy to understand. When designing a form, I follow 4 golden rules. 1. Provide context to the user. 2. Allow users to change their answer. 3. Provide users with examples for clarity. And 4. Provide users with a reason why we may need certain information. And here are a couple of other recommendations to make your forms more accessible. Use a single column form. It's important to create consistency across devices and not to disrupt the vertical rhythm a keyboard user, for example, would take. A clear flow helps improve the relationship between the label and the input field, which would affect visual impaired users who may have tunnel vision, just like the example in the background. Use focus state. I'm surprised when I use some websites and focus isn't used. It is mainly to help keyboard users move through a page by jumping from one interaction element to the next. Focus states let users know which element they're currently on and that it is ready to be interacted with. But remember, always to check that the colours you use have a strong colour contrast ratio. And use plain English. Often we can focus on the interactive elements of a form when it comes to accessibility, but content is also of significant importance. Headings, labels, legends, hint text, error messages. They all need to be clear, concise, specific, consistent, and human. To some users, English may be their second language. They may be dyslexic or require the use of a screen reader, or in some cases, all 3. We therefore aim to write content for a reading age of 9, and forms are no different. And that's why use plain English is my 5th and final golden rule for today's talk. But if I can give you one takeaway from today, not just on forms, but out of all the topics that have been covered, is this. If you want to be inclusive, start with being accessible, because when you do, everyone benefits. Thank you for listening. I hope you found my talk useful.
And with that, we reach the end of Accessibility Manchester and the co-op takeover. I've been absolutely blown away by the quality of the lightning talks that we've seen over the last 3 days. Across a variety of different topics, with day 1 covering being inclusive, day 2 talking about doing accessibility at scale, and obviously the talks we've heard today all about how you bring it to life and how you get it done. It's inspiring to hear from so many people, and it's incredibly moving in a way, and humbling to see a real focus on this, which has definitely been lacking in the industry for a while. So events like this, people coming together and talking like this, are so vitally important. So a huge thank you to you for showing up. An even bigger thank you to our speakers for taking the time to put the prep in and pulling together such fantastic lightning talks. And a massive thank you to Accessibility Manchester and the organisers, both for allowing us to take over the event, but also for all the hard work that goes on behind the scenes. Setting these kind of events up is never easy. There are untold hours that go on behind the scenes that no one sees, so a huge thanks to the organisers for caring so passionately about this as a topic and devoting a lot of their time into getting this event put on. Make sure you go follow them over on Twitter. They're at Accessibility Manchester, which is A11YNCR, which will be linked in the description below. So big thanks again to all of the speakers. Remember, all of the videos are going to be available after the event. We'll make sure they're up on YouTube. Questions, as we said before, are on Sli.do using the hashtag accessibility. And keep your eye out for the follow-up blog post that we'll do while we answer the questions and kind of explore some of the topics in a bit more detail. That blog will go up on the Co-op Digital blog, and the best way of finding out about that is to follow us on Twitter, which is at Co-op Digital, where you can see all of our brilliant job opportunities, but you can also see lots of the great blog content that our teams put out about the work that they're doing, and like I say, special focus on accessibility in the up-and-coming blog. So big thank you for attending, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you. Bye.